What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC St. Louis. You guys know the routine by now. I'm sure a lot of you guys are already taking in a nice little 3 to 5 second inhale, holding it for 3 to 5 seconds, exhaling 3 to 5 seconds. You're relaxing now. You're settling in with the teller as we dive into this exciting fight card. If you ask me, I like this fight card a lot. I think there's just some intriguing matchups, fun fighters. Okay, I mean, I'm not saying that we have the highest level of talent scattered all throughout this card, but look, I mean, Derrick Lewis, he really epitomizes this fight card. He's a fighter that's been losing a lot of fights, but he's the knockout king. He's as exciting as they come. All right, Rodrigo Nascimento will be a nice little test for him. Chase Hooper, a lot of Hooper fans out there. You guys know he's a little bit of a one-dimensional type of fighter who's been working on his overall craft for some time, taking on the very fun Slava Borshchev, Terrance McKinney, an absolute ball of fire. All right, so you guys see what I'm talking about here. I really like the Hadley versus Charles Johnson fight. And then those are actually the preliminary fights there. So, you know, the main card, we got Buckley versus Ribovics, who's a fighter who's starting to make some noise. Buckley's been on an absolute tear. You know, Mateusz Rębecki is one of those fighters for you guys that are looking for fighters with a really high ceiling. If you're looking for a fighter on this card or for fighters on this card that have a very high ceiling, you're looking for that top tier type of talent, you want to look towards a Mateusz Rębecki's way, or maybe even a Robelis Despaigne, who obviously has a lot more to prove, but he has some of that raw talent. All right, so Carlos Ulberg, also a very talented fighter. So, all right, guys, we're going to dive into every single fight here. You guys know the routine. We have timestamps if you want to jump to any specific fight. We are powered by BetUS. Check the description of this video and make an account through that link there. You're going to get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. All right, guys? And BetUS helps me do what I do over here. So you guys know if you do that, it helps the channel out overall. And if you deposit through that link, let me know. I got a gift for you guys. All right? Other than that, just catch you on my social media. It's all listed below, and where you guys can see all types of wild content coming your way. I've been being more and more personal on my Instagram. Just if you guys saw, I had the lamb spinning on the spigot this past weekend. You guys saw me enjoying myself. So shout out to everybody that follows me on IG and Twitter. You guys know I appreciate you very much. We'll not hold you guys up any longer. Let's jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
In the flyweight division, we got Aldrich taking on Veronica Hardy. Two fighters I very much enjoy watching perform. Both fighters are solid fighters. They're well-rounded. They bring it. I know a lot of you guys out there like to complain about women's mixed martial arts bouts, and you guys are definitely not talking about fighters like Aldrich and Veronica Hardy, if you ask me. I mean, these girls have put in the work to fine-tune their craft. I really enjoy watching Aldrich's boxing. I think she's one of the more high-caliber boxers in all of women's mixed martial arts. She's on a 2-fight winning streak. The Na Liang victory where she got to finish there in the second round, I mean, that she did what she should have done. Okay, Na Liang, one of the most atrocious fighters. I mean, she is just an absolute boomer bust if she doesn't get her way in the first round, and a lot more busting going on there. So the Montana De La Rosa victory I respect a little bit more so. Before that, you take a look at her 2 losses, Ariane Lipsky and Erin Blanchfield. Those are 2 high caliber opponents, and you know, she has a high caliber victory before that over Jillian Robertson. You know, so she's put in work throughout the years, and she's 31 years old. She's cruising into the prime of her career. And Veronica Hardy, on the other hand, remember, she had that long layoff from the game, which I think was a very smart move for her, just based on how she's looked since bouncing back in the cage, or since coming back to the cage. And her first fight back was that Juliana Miller, a performance that was phenomenal for her. But I mean, you have to take into consideration that Juliana Miller is a very low caliber fighter. She's that fighter that has that jiu-jitsu base. It's really not a solid mixed martial arts artist, to say the least. Fighter that should have never been fighting in the octagon. She came through the Ultimate Fighter, and she had her little avenue there. But you know, before that victory, she lost to Bea Malecki, which was a questionable loss there. Had a nice armbar victory over Polyana Viana before that. But the point being, as I circle back to my original point, was coming off that long layoff that I think was a smart move, because losing to Bea Malecki was not a good look, but the way she's looked in the cage against Juliana Miller and Jamie Lynn Horth, all be lower level talent, the way she's looked in those fights, I feel very comfortable saying that she has evolved her game very much. And it's common sense when you think about the fact that she was fighting in the UFC at 24, 25, 26 years old or whatnot, even fighting in the bantamweight division against women that were much larger than her. Now she's 28, which is she's still very young, but she was obviously going to work in the gym while she was going through that layoff. And you guys know she's shoulder to shoulder with Dan Hardy. I believe she's married to Hardy. Yes, she is married to Hardy. Of course, she has the last name now. And Dan Hardy did good there. And I'm a Dan Hardy guy. I think that Dan Hardy is a true student of the game. And I think that if you surround yourself with a guy like that, if you're married to a guy like that, you're going to learn a lot. And that's what we're seeing in the cage here. So this is going to be a fun fight. Now, Veronica Hardy, how I see these girls matched up in the cage, Aldrich will definitely have a little bit of a size advantage, which I think she could use to her advantage. I think that it would be a smart move for Aldrich to not just rely on her boxing, but I would like to see her changing levels, try to get this fight down to the mat a little here and there. I've seen Hardy kind of fall to her back at times. Even in some of her recent wins, she's on her back a little bit more than I would like. I think Aldrich can rack up some points, control her. We've seen JJ Aldrich's ground game evolving very much so as well. Using some ground and pound down there and whatnot. And, Hardy will be attacking off her back, but as long as Aldrich stays out of trouble and doesn't fall into a sub, I think that it will favor her there. And it's also worth noting that Hardy looks to be in the best shape of her career. I mean, she's coming in very slim. I bet you her cardio is going to be very good. And one edge I would give Hardy is I think that Hardy is a little bit more feisty. She's a little bit more ferocious, if you know what I'm saying, right? Sometimes JJ Aldrich can be more technical. She could be in control of fights. We saw it in the Macy Barber fight. When Macy Barber had that edge and tenacity and aggressiveness, she ended up breaking Aldrich. Now, that was some years ago, and Aldrich just had time to work on that. But I think that Torres might be the more feisty fighter here. I've been very torn on where I was going to go with my selection for this fight, but I am actually going to settle in with the JJ Aldrich underdog pick here, which right now, JJ Aldrich, she's a plus 115 underdog on BetUS. She's pretty much been an underdog. She has been an underdog since these lines have opened up a little bit up and down, but Aldrich is the underdog here. People are very high on what they've seen from Hardy as of recently. I think that Hardy can definitely go out here and sneak in a W. She can get a W. I shouldn't say sneak in a W. She's the favorite here, but she could possibly go out there and have another performance like she's had in her last two fights. But JJ, man, she's just been cruising along, battling in the octagon. And, from what I hear from digging around, this is a girl that's very dedicated to the game. And I think as she cruises into the prime of her career, she's really going to start to hit her stride here. I think that she can kind of regulate Hardy there. Hardy's high, these two wins, but against lower level competition, now Hardy's coming in with a lot of confidence. I think facing that higher level competition, JJ Aldrich can kind of give her a little shoulder check and bring her back to reality there. And it'll be a closely contested match, but give me JJ Aldrich, and I will go Aldrich via decision. Fighting out of the southpaw stance too, man. She's tricky. Crafty boxer fighting out of the southpaw stance. Hardy will be changing stances back and forth. And just the last thing I'll say, one of the reasons why I kind of like this fight for Aldrich is because Aldrich likes to move at her own pace. She doesn't like when fighters kind of bum rush her and pressure her. And Hardy has been the type of fighter, especially recently, where she's using her footwork and she's on the back foot, circling around, trying to lure her opposition in. And I think that will play well into what JJ Aldrich wants to do here. I think she'll be sniping her boxing shots. So give me JJ Aldrich via decision. In the welterweight division, we have two of the bigger welterweights that we've seen throughout the years. Kevin Jousset, first and foremost, this dude, a very large fighter for the division, fighting at a team, city kickboxing. Jared Gooden, a fighter that has been back and forth from the UFC. He's been a guy that's taken short notice fights, and the UFC obviously respects him for always being game and being willing to step in. So they give him opportunities when need be. But let's be very clear. Jared Gooden is hardly a UFC caliber fighter. Okay, I know that he's had some victories in the UFC, but first off, his last victory where he submitted Wellington Turman is 3-6 now in the UFC throughout his career. So understand who Turman is. Lost to Harris before that. You're looking at some victories here over Jackson and Usher. Those are on the regional scene. Got knocked out by Impa, which that doesn't really look that bad these days. Impa Kasingane, I mean, he's an absolute stud. You guys have heard me said this recently. It's a shame he's not still in the UFC, but a couple other victories outside of the UFC. And, the two victories that he's had in the octagon were over Nicholas Stoles and Wellington Turman. So, I mean, just it is what it is. But listen, Gooden is a well-rounded fighter. He's a dog. He's a tough dude. He will bring the fight. And he's the type of fighter that if you show up to the octagon and your head is not on right, if you're kind of not mentally checked in for a UFC fight night that you're about to be participating in, yes, Gooden can obviously show up and he can hand you an L because he's the type of guy that's game. He's going to show up. He's going to be moving around. He's a big dude. He throws with ill intent. But if Kevin Jousset shows up here and he has his head on his shoulders, I like his striking much more. I think he's much more technical. Now, both fighters do have some flaws defensively. I think that Jousset is just a little stiff at times, but somehow he's been kind of avoiding damage somehow. But I do notice when I watch tape on him, he's a little stiff. On the other hand, though, Gooden is there to be hit. There's no question about it, and the numbers don't lie. He's absorbed 6.68 strikes per minute in the UFC, and watch the tape. You see it. You see him eating front kicks to the face and all that. He gets tagged up. So I think that Jousset can definitely land the mark here. He could hurt Gooden. Now Gooden, he's out of his 9 losses, he's been finished twice. He's decently durable, I would say. He's a decently durable dude. He will show up and look to brawl it out for 15 minutes. So, all in all, I'm on Kevin Jousset. The ceiling is much higher. It's an obvious statement, but the ceiling is much higher on the Jousset. I also like the fact that he's showing different elements of his game, right? He has that kickboxing and striking type background, but in his UFC debut, which was an official play of ours, he hit a first-round submission on Kiefer Crosby there. That was a nice one. I liked the way he looked against Song Kenan. Striking looked very sharp. Man, I just think that you have to side with Kevin Jousset. All right, if anyone's picking Gooden, comment below. I mean, I would love to know how you get to that pick there. Gooden will have almost a 2-inch reach advantage. Like I said, nice frame. Both these guys, nice frames for the division. But Gooden is a Franken Beans type of fighter. All right, you're not able to grab a nice little ribeye. You're short on cash, and you're getting like a pre-made Campbell's Franken Beans, and it's a rough night. You're throwing them on the pan. You're sitting out under a bridge like that dude from Dennis the Menace back in the day. So it's tough, and you don't want to be in that situation. So make sure you're on the Jousset side. Now, as far as the money line goes, Kevin Jousset opened up as a -215 on BetUS, touched 240 there for a minute, back up to 220. So coming back up to where it opened up. And I don't have a problem with Jousset. Honestly, anywhere from -250 and down, 260 and down, I don't have a problem with that. If you were targeting this money line as high, obviously 215, 220, much more respectable and a much more, it's a much better value line. But I don't really have a problem with it. If anyone slips up and catches this line later or whatnot, and you're on Jousset, I wouldn't argue with you. I think Jousset is going to get his hand raised. I feel decently comfortable about saying that there. And I would lean towards a decision victory for Kevin here. Like I said, Jared's been knocked out twice. The Impa knockout, but Impa is a high caliber fighter, and he's been finishing dudes. Jared overall has been a durable fighter, and he will look to press this fight, which could make him vulnerable to potentially be countered. But all in all, I still have to lean towards a decision victory for Kevin Jousset, and keep an eye out for our prop edition that we will do later this week, and we'll look at some lines on finishing props and specific method of victories for not every one of these fights, but you guys know we target and we talk about the ones that we like, where we see value. Keep an eye, that will be coming out later this week. Now, you guys know I'm going to be up for this fight. This is one of my most targeted fights on the card, as far as just from a fan standpoint. I really enjoy watching this dude Jake Hadley fight. I'm high at him, aka Sid from Toy Story. And Charles Johnson, you got to love his story too, man. He had his back up against the wall in his last fight, potentially was going to be cut by the UFC if he took an L there, and he got a W. and a solid performance by Charles Johnson there. He's taken his share of losses in the UFC, but he always brings it. He's willing to step in on short notice. If you remember the Ode Osborne loss that he took recently, said that he was in the gym nonstop, but seemed to kind of gas out in that fight. Losses to Cody Durden and Rafael Esteban after that, and then he just bounced back with that big victory over Azit Maxim, an up-and-coming prospect in the UFC, if you will there. So, listen, I want to talk about Jake Hadley here for a second, and I'll tell you guys why I'm such a fan of him as a whole, and I'm really hoping that he starts to reach his potential, because I know he's taken some scattered L's, but he has a very high ceiling in this division. He is a fighter that trained mixed martial arts, right? He trained to be fighting in the UFC one day. That was his initial intro to the fight game. It wasn't, he's not a dude that started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or started training wrestling, or wrestled throughout his youth and then got into MMA. Hadley, if you've seen the video of him where he's blowing out the candles of his birthday cake when he's like 6-7 years old, I mean, he's wishing to fight in the UFC one day. And if that doesn't give you the chills, or if that doesn't give you that warm feeling, man, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know if you're really a big fight fan, or as much of a fight fan as the majority of us here, because I think we can all relate to that. I think the majority of us have had aspirations like that when we were younger, kind of visualizing fighting in the UFC or something like that. But it's cool when you actually see it on video. You see it from a young kid. And his fighting style is kind of that type of fighting style. You could tell he's a very well-rounded fighter. I do think he's lacking in one department, and that's what's been costing him as of recently. He's a little bit too comfortable falling to his back. He's comfortable in his jiu-jitsu. He does know that he can end a fight off his back. He's dangerous there. But when you're fighting in the UFC, man, you got to be careful taking that type of approach, because there's fighters that will stall you out and they will sneak out W's against you. All right. And we saw that in his last fight, right? In his last fight, he takes that L to Cody Durden. Cody Durden, a solid wrestler, right? A legitimate wrestler. I think it was a Division I wrestler, and he used a lot of those wrestling skills to control him down there. And I think that Hadley was just a little bit too comfortable falling to his back at times, or putting himself in position where he was trying to throw offensive threats and then getting capitalized and being put on his back. But before that, 2 nice victories. Jake Hadley's an absolute fight finisher. The other L was against Alan Nascimento, a very underrated fighter, I believe a shootbox fighter who has some solid BJJ, controlled him down on the mat for the majority of that fight. But all the other victories under the UFC banner, all finishes, those 3 finishes there. And as Hadley gets his mind right and fully understands what this game is about, and kind of fixes that one flaw in his game, I think he could be a major problem for fighters in this division, because he's not going to just go out there and sneak a decision off you. This is a dude that can knock you out. He works the body beautifully with his boxing. He's really, really fluid with his striking skills, very fluid with his jiu-jitsu and all that, like we talked about, champion on the regional scene. And I think that his ceiling is quite high, if you ask me. And I love the fact that he is an extremely confident dude. I love his mental game. He thinks that he's the best fighter in the world. He's willing to take on anybody in this division right now. And I think as he matures and hits 30 years old or so, we will be seeing him fight the best of the best in this division. I really do believe that. All right. So this is a good test for him. Stylistically, this is a fight that should play out to his advantage. I think that Charles Johnson will be willing to engage in a fun fight. And I think that Hadley has the potential to hurt Johnson in this fight. But Charles Johnson's never been finished. It's going to be hard to target Hadley getting that finish, even though he's an absolute fight finisher. Johnson's been very durable through his career. Wouldn't be shocked, though, if we see Charles Johnson get finished for the first time in his pro career. Would not be surprised, because I think these guys are going to clash, and Hadley may be able to hurt him and then eventually find a sub down in the mat or in some type of transition. And remember, Hadley almost had that sub on Durden. He was so close to getting that sub, and that was a fight that was so close for him getting a W. It just came up a little bit short. Just 27 years old, though. You're going to see that growth. You're going to see that growth in his game. Just like we talked about with Veronica Hardy, a fighter that took a little 2-year layoff, but she's so young, right? 25 to 27. You see that rapid development. Jake Hadley, even though he's been training from such a young age, as his body matures and as he physically matures, he will be a much more dangerous fighter. Charles Johnson is who he is. We know who Charles Johnson is right now. 33-year-old dude. He already has 20 pro fights. He's going to be the same old Charles Johnson. Good boxing, good movement, tough dude. The mullet will be flapping a little bit. The little curls will be waving in the wind. And I'm taking Jake Hadley here. As far as I'm concerned, if If Hadley was to drop this fight, it would be due to the fact that Charles Johnson kind of goes the boring route and just needs to get another W. So he's controlling him down to the mat and really trying to wrestle. But even then, I think that Hadley went back to the gym after that last L and just completely is working on that part of his game. So I find it hard to believe that's going to be a scenario that happens, especially for the fact that Charles Johnson's a gamer fighting in St. Louis. This is a dude that's going to want to put on a show. All right. So I am going to take Jake Hadley right now. And Jake Hadley, he is a -165 on BetUS. So the line's not crazy. I think that line's pretty accurate, and I would rather be on the Jake Hadley side, even at the -165, 175 type of line, even though he's not a hefty favorite. He's a decent favorite there. Still feel more comfortable being on the Hadley side, even though he's still going through some growing pains in the octagon, and we don't know for sure if he's ironed those all out. Give me Jake Hadley. And this is a tough one. Via decision or finish. You almost got to lean decision. But don't be shocked if the pace is very high and Hadley finds a sub here.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
In the welterweight division, we got Trey, the Truth, Waters taking on Billy Goff. Billy Goff, just 25 years old. For whatever reason, Billy Goff kind of reminds me of Blake Builder. If you guys remember Blake Builder, I believe they both came off the same season, possibly even fought in the same episode. I think they were I don't know if they weren't both undefeated, but there was some similarities. But the difference you have to really understand is Billy Goff, much younger and has a lot more room for growth. While on the other hand, Blake Builder, I think he's in his 30s now, but I don't know, just that thought came to mind. But Trey Waters also comes off Dana White's Contender Series. Now, he got finished up very quickly on the show, but you understand it was against a very high-level opponent in Gabriel Bonfim, which is one of the Bonfim brothers, even the brother that I hold in higher regard. So he was submitted there in the first round, bounced back with 2 nice victories though, went to the regional scene over to LFA, knocked out Jalen Fuller, and then comes into the UFC and gets a victory over Josh Quinlan. Now, here's the thing that I noticed about Trey Waters. First and foremost, obviously, he's very, very long and very tall and rangy for this division. The more and more he learns how to use that length, that's going to do wonders for his career. I have seen him struggle as far as his takedown defense goes. We've seen him put on his butt quite a bit. Even if you watch the regional tape on him, the thing that I like, though, even earlier on in his career, he seems to have a nose for knowing how to get back up. He has a nice get-up game, and it's looked even sharper and sharper as of recently. So that's something that's really going for him. He's a tall dude, and if he really makes these fighters work extremely hard to try to get takedowns, and then he's bouncing back up, they're going to be breathing heavily. We've seen it time and time again. It gasses these guys out when they're just so desperate to get takedowns, and then they finally get one, and then the fighter's bouncing back up. And then once Waters is standing, like I said, he has that range. He needs to learn how to continue to use that, but he's a fast striker. He's quick twitch, and he'll pop you up. But technically, I would say he does need to refine things. And of course, you got Billy Goff over here shadowboxing, but Billy Goff, tough dude as well. But back to that point, Trey Waters needs to continue to refine his striking. It has looked better and better in his past couple fights. You watch some of his earlier tape, and he's kind of loopy with his shots, and he's kind of just lackadaisical the way he's flicking them out there, and you could see him getting countered with the big shot. And a guy like Billy Goff, who's a well-rounded fighter and has a nose for getting knockouts, you do have to be careful about that. He's a fight finisher. And I'll tell you what, I've been a little bit back and forth with who I'm going with for my pick here. And as you do know, that Goff is coming off 2 first-round victories. I'm not high on Shimon Smetrosky. Yasuko Kinoshita is a fighter that I was very high on. I thought that he had a very high ceiling after his Dana White's Contender Series fight. And he was just finished again, or he was finished, before or after. It was before, yeah. He was finished by Adam Fouguet and Billy Goff. So he's on a 2-fight losing streak. He was also finished 2 fights before his victory on Dana White's Contender Series. So, I mean, he has a knack for being finished. So I don't know how much stock I put into that Goff finish. I don't think it was as big of a victory as maybe as some of us thought at the time or whatnot, or as it's kind of marinating and we're sitting back analyzing it. And I was close to taking Billy Goff in this spot here, but the more I break down tape on Trey, I'm gonna pick Trey to get the job done here. I like his length. I like the development that he's shown. He's a little bit more physically mature at 29 years old, even though both guys almost have the same amount of pro fights. But still, another thing too, even though Billy Goff has been doing his thing as of recently, he's a fighter. Took 2 losses early in his career and has a couple losses as an amateur. So he's not just a guy that doesn't know how to take an L. He's not a guy that's invincible. He's taken some L's in his limited amount of fights that he's had, amateur and pro. And I can easily see a guy like Trey come in here and get the job done. He's coming in with a lot of confidence as well after just taking out Josh Quinlan, getting that first official victory in the UFC. And I will pick Trey Waters to get the job done here. So Trey opened up as a -170 on BetUS. Hit a -150 for a little bit. Even went down to a -175, a little bit up and down type action. And I'm not crazy about Trey where this line is. Personally, if I was going to be on the Trey side, I would want him back down at 150 or lower, 140. I think this is a close fight. Okay, so if I'm really analyzing the money line on this fight here, I think the value is on Billy Goff, especially when you're talking about a +140 type of line. Billy Goff has been looking good. This is a fight where they could really clash. I can see these guys clashing, and you never know. Goff can get his hand raised easily, I would say. It could definitely happen like that. And I think the value would be on Billy Goff at +140, which is out there on multiple sports books. So on BetUS, he's a +135 right now. But I will take Trey to get the job done. And I would favor him to get the job done via decision and a nice old scrap. Another very solid women's mixed martial arts matchup here. On the first half of the event, Tabatha Ricci taking on Tecia Torres. Tecia Torres comes into this fight off a 2-year layoff. I believe she just had a child as well. I was there for her last fight. I was cage side. That was that UFC 273 event, and that was one of my official plays, in fact. And I was just rewatching some of the tape on that fight, and it still has me scratching my head as to why the judges sided with Mackenzie Dern in that fight. A complete blasphemy. Now, there's some things that Tecia Torres could have done better to really put a stamp on that fight to make sure that she got her hand raised. Talk about that here in a second, but she should have had the nod there. And if she had that victory, she would have been on a 4-fight winning streak coming into this fight. But she is 34 years old. You guys know Tecia Torres with the Taekwondo background, more of a striking-based fighter. But at this stage in the game, she is, I would say, just about as well-rounded as anyone in the division. I mean, yeah, her striking is her bread and butter, but this is a girl that can grind in the clinch. She has takedown defense. She has some grappling skills. She's similar to her wife, Rocky Pennington. They're just girls that have just put so much time and so much work in the gym, and they're just very refined fighters. Okay, it's kind of hard to exploit them in one sense in the cage. Tabatha Ricci, believes she is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. That's kind of her base, but she's really rounding out to be a complete mixed martial artist, and she's a solid fighter. Just lost a split decision to Lupi Guarines, who Lupi's been on fire as of recently. If Tabatha Ricci would have got the nod in that fight, I mean, her stock of momentum would have been as high as ever. And I like the fact that this matchup for Tabatha, Tabatha has been a fighter that's been very undersized in some of her fights. If you think back to her UFC debut, she took an L to Manan Farot, got knocked out in the second round, but Manan much larger. And I really like the way that she bounced back with 4 victories in a row after that and just showed to be really resilient mentally. I think that she's a game fighter. And one thing I also want to note, so we talked about her being a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if you're kind of wondering how her striking is going to hold up in this match here against a solid striker in Torres, Ricci's looking better in the cage with her striking. I believe she is dating. I don't think they're married. I'm sure they're dating. She's dating Caleb Walsh, who I think that Dana White has him signed as a boxer, but he's a talented young boxer. And you would assume that they put some work in the gym together. I'm sure he's teaching her tricks in the gym, and you would expect to see her striking get better and better. She's a phenomenal athlete. And when you really take into consideration her youth, her athleticism and all that, I'm going to side with Tabatha Ricci in this spot, mainly based off the activity as well. I have some question marks on Tecia Torres. Maybe if Torres was coming into this fight, just off a fight that took place 4 or 5 months ago, she was active, I wouldn't have as much question in her. But she's 34 years old, just had a baby. And Tabatha, on the other hand, is very hungry after just coming up a little bit short in that split decision there. I could see this fight playing out very closely, but Tecia Torres, I said I wanted to circle back to that fight against Mackenzie Dern. There was times I thought that Tecia Torres could have just thrown a little bit more volume out in that fight and just made it look better for the judges to put a stamp on those rounds. And I could see Tabatha Ricci coming off that split decision loss, knowing that she needs to really do something like that. It's fresh on her mind. I can see her kind of just edging out some rounds. So I'm gonna pick Tabatha Ricci here. I don't say it with an overwhelming amount of confidence. Now, Ricci opened up as a -160 on BetUS. I think that line is too high. Don't sleep on Tecia Torres. She's game. If her head is completely in the game right now, she can easily come in here and upset you for your money. Now, Ricci's a -140. It's even that is a little tough. I mean, I'm slightly leaning towards Ricci. So, I mean, I'm thinking I have Ricci capped at like a -130. I'm just slightly leaning her way. And I don't see an overwhelming amount of value on Ricci anywhere from 140 to 160. Not an overwhelming amount of value, but I will slightly lean towards Ricci's way. I'm going to say she sneaks out a decision in a close fight. I don't see her coming in here and being the first fighter to ever finish Tecia Torres. I mean, she hasn't been a fight finisher. Out of her 9 victories, she's only had 3 victories. And I think this goes to a decision and she just squeaks by here. For those of you guys that are looking for an action-packed fight or for a fight where there's a very good chance where we see a finish, this is one of the fights here. Now, there's a fight we'll be talking about a little bit later where there's a great chance of a finish happening as well. I think you guys know which one we're talking about there. But you could pencil this fight in as a fight where we could easily see a finish, or it's going to be a very action-packed fight. Speaking of action, don't forget, sign up to BetUS with the link in the description here, and you will get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. Shout out to BetUS. Appreciate everything they're doing over here. And no, this is the fight, man. This is one of the fights where it's going to be very exciting. And I understand that Esteban Ribovics is coming off his first ever decision victory as a pro, and his first ever UFC victory at that. But understand that he is a fight finisher, man. That's what he's been doing throughout his career. Remember the knockout that he had on Dana White's Contender Series? Hit Thomas Paul with that nasty check hook. Finished him up in the first round there. Finishing dudes over on the South American scene for quite a while. And on the other hand, Terrance McKinney is an absolute wrecking machine. He has a wrestling background. Okay, so there's a little bit of an element we need to talk about here. He does have that collegiate wrestling background. When he chooses to use his wrestling, you really see that he has a great ability with it. I mean, we've seen him rip guys down to the mat and dominate them for brief moments in time. The thing is, you could never really rely on him to continuously have like a disciplined route using his wrestling. He's going to use it to try to land big shots when he's down on the mat. He's going to give his opponents opportunities to get back up to their feet. And I would also say that Ribovics is a fighter that's get-up game has been looking better and better. He was taken down by Loik Rashabov in his UFC debut quite a bit, and as the fight progressed, he was getting up easier and easier as the fight was going on. His cardio was good. Loik was breathing heavily, and Ribovics had some success later in that fight. And I could see something similarly playing out, even if you trusted McKinney to continuously go down that route, but I don't think you could even trust him to do that, because he's going to look to make a big statement here, fighting in St. Louis, and these guys are going to clash, and I think someone's going to get finished up here. Okay, and Esteban is a fighter that has a lot less mileage on him, seems to be a much more durable fighter. Terrance McKinney is a fighter that has been finishing all 6 of his losses. You guys know what kind of fighter he is. He's very fun to watch, but even dating to his first performance on Dana White's Contender Series, where he was knocked out by Sean Woodson with that flying knee. I mean, he was so hyped up going into that fight. He was a big favorite. Sean Woodson hits him with the flying knee there. Finished by Derrick Minner. then starts to string off these victories and had some impressive victories, like knocking out Matt Frevola, submitting Faraz Zaim, who's been really hot. But then you're starting to see it again, right? He's gets knocked out by Drew Dober, gets KO'd by Ismail Bonfim, devastating fashion, gets submitted by Nazim Sadykhov after starting off hot in that fight and then kind of breaking in the second round, fading in the second round. Okay, so knocks out Mike Breeden and Brendan Marotte, but those are two low-level fighters, okay? Esteban has shown some promise, and I think that Esteban is a bad matchup for him because he's durable, he's accurate, and as they trade and as they engage in a fun fight, Terrance McKinney is going to be the fighter most likely to break down and be finished in this fight. Okay, so McKinney has all these tools. He's going to have the reach advantage and all that, a 4.5-inch reach advantage. He's a stud athlete, but I do not trust in his durability. And I think that Esteban is going to be there. He's going to be in his face. He's going to be there to engage in a fight. And I think that he's going to touch McKinney. And I think McKinney is like my old... one of my first cars I had, man. I had a classic 89 Eldorado. Okay, I wish I still had it. I'm an idiot for not taking better care of it. I bought that car, 42,000 miles on it, but it was an unreliable car. Even though it didn't have as many miles on it, it was an older car, started to break down on me, hence why I kind of parted ways with it back in the day. But McKinney is like an 89 Eldorado. I had the Barrett's edition, the burgundy leather. I had the 212s in the back. It was a two-door. It was a mint Cadillac, Cadillac Oyster White, whatever you want to call it. All right, guys. I had the limo tin on it with the Miami Dolphins license plate, cruising around Tallahassee. All right, guys. You don't even know about the teller. All right, don't get me started. Went on a high-speed chase from the police. I got stories, guys. I got stories. I did actually go on a high-speed pursuit with the girl in the car, handed her my beer, swerved to the woods. That's allegedly, and they came looking for me for a while. But I got stories, guys. All right, to tell her stories. But McKinney is like an Eldorado, an 89 Eldorado. He's gonna break down. Esteban Ribovics is like a nice little 2022 Hyundai. He's gonna get you to your destination, and he's gonna get the job done in this fight here. So. I will be on the Ribovics side. Now, Ribovics, he's not really cheap here. He's a minus 160, but if you're targeting Ribovics, you might want to sit on this line. You open up as a minus 175. He's now minus 160. We may see action continuously come in on McKinney. People are high on his tools. They like the dog value. They're kind of overlooking the fact that he's an unreliable Eldorado, as we talked about. I like Ribovics. Sit on that line. Maybe you can catch it at minus 145. That'd be nice, 140. And I do like Esteban Ribovics to get a knockout finish in this fight. We got an absolute stylistic clash here. Chase Hooper taking on Slava Borshchev. Of course, Hooper, the BJJ specialist, Slava Borshchev, Slava Klaus, the kickboxing specialist. If either fighter has success in this fight and they get the job done, there's a very good chance that they dominate in their respected field, right? If Slava gets the victory, he's probably going to knock Chase Hooper out. He's probably going to get a finish. If Chase has success in this fight, he's probably going to have a lot of success down on the mat. Maybe gets a rear naked choke or some type of sub, or maybe even can flatten Slav out. I don't see that as likely, but maybe can flatten him out, TKO him. But these fighters want to keep this fight in their world. Now, we know that they're both working on all aspects of their game. Slava Borshchev, a fighter that's been working on his wrestling and grappling with Uriah Faber. Chase Hooper, a young kid that has not been shy to travel the world and train with all type of great fighters. Training with Stephen Thompson, working on his striking, and he's worked on his wrestling with Ben Askren, so he could get the fight down to the mat and use that BJJ, right? I mean, both these fighters are making intelligent choices outside the cage, and they should continue to have success in the cage. But unfortunately for them, one of them, someone's going to take a loss this upcoming Saturday. So, Chase Hooper, if you guys remember, there was a moment in time where I didn't even feel that Chase Hooper should be fighting in the UFC, and I'll kind of explain why. So remember his fight on Dana White's Contender Series? He was so young at the time, but he almost was finished in that fight. He took a ridiculous amount of damage. It was such a fun fight. He eventually used his grappling, came back, and he got a W in that fight. Okay, but he then showed that he had major flaws in his striking defense, and we saw it in the Bruce Leroy fight. We saw it in the Peter Barrett fight, even though he got that submission in the third round. Shout out to my boy, Slippery Pete, one of my good friends in the game. But Peter Barrett almost had him finished in that fight. He landed some big shots. Peterson, excuse me if I said Steven Peterson there, but Peter Barrett, excuse me if I misspoke. But Initially, I was talking about Peter Barrett, had a lot of success there. Steven Peterson had success with his striking. Steve Garcia starches him, knocks him out. So there was this continuous pattern of him taking a lot of damage on the feet. And then when he had success, of course, he was using his grappling and whatnot. But, when you're facing off with a guy like Slava, who, this guy is so damn dangerous on the feet. The nasty knockout that he just had over Mahashate, the comeback that he had over Sadyakov. And I say comeback, I know he didn't win the fight, but to come back in that fight and push it to a draw, the way he took over that fight late. And don't forget, Nazim Sadyakov is a well-rounded fighter that has grappling ability, and he wasn't able to continuously exploit Slava's grappling there. So that could be a little bit of a problem for Hooper if he has that same type of success and can keep the fight standing long enough. I think he will land some big shots. Also, take a look at these losses that he took. Mike Davis, shout out to Davis. You guys know we interviewed him on the show a long time ago. He's returned to the fight game, but just showing time and time again that even though it's rare, but when he steps into the cage, he's one of the best fighters in the world in his weight class. Mark Diakese, not the most exciting fighter, but a fighter that has shown that he can go out there and exploit you with his wrestling, which will have you scratching your head as he came into the UFC as a striker, but somehow he exploits guys down on the mat. But and just real quick, the two big knockout victories Slava had against Duncan and Dakota Bush, just showcasing that he can knock you out. But the point being is that, yes, he was exploited with his takedown defense in those two fights, but those are high caliber fighters. And he's a fighter going into this fight. Of course, it's a common sense statement, but he will be the best version of himself. His takedown defense will be better than ever. And I have a feeling he'll be able to keep Hooper off of him. And as Hooper tries to get the fight down to the mat, I think we're going to kind of see some of those performances where Hooper took a lot of damage. It's going to be kind of a similar type of fight as one of those old school Hooper fights where he's getting smashed up, he's getting bloodied up. I'm going to say this fight looks similarly to the Steve Garcia fight. I'm going to say he eats a big shot and gets finished up, taking Slavoklas via knockout/TKO. And I'll say it happens early on, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in the first or second round. And if it doesn't, I think by then we'll kind of know which way the fight's going. So let's take a look at the betting line here. Slava opens up as a -170, hit -200 on BetUS, but that line is completely going the other way. Touch -145. It's 155 right now. So if you're on Slavoklas here, maybe you're sitting back on this line. I kind of understand why people are targeting Hooper while the line was so high, but you could have got Hooper. That's some decent dog odds there for a while. We saw Hooper as high as as a +165. And I understand that. I understand targeting that line potentially as we're seeing him look more comfortable in the cage, and maybe he can get this fight down to the mat and have a lot of success there. But where the line is at now, I would want nothing to do with Hooper at +125 or anything like that. I would want some substantial amount of value. And I feel comfortable being on the Slavoklas line here, and I'm monitoring that line and seeing where I can get some solid value on it. Just the last thing I'll just reiterate, the resilience that Slavoklas showed in that last fight and the development that he's showing. His cardio is good. He's making these fighters work to get the fight down to the mat, and he hits so damn hard. This dude Hooper, he might not have any pearly whites to chew on those M&Ms that he likes. He might be chewing on M&Ms with his gums after this fight's over with, after he eats some nasty shots to his cranium. We got the big boys throwing down. Robelis, Despaigne taking a Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Robelis, how about his UFC debut where he goes out there and makes quick work of Josh Parisian, gets that knockout within 18 seconds. What a fun fight that was. Of course, that was on the O'Malley Vera card. That was a fun one, UFC 299. This dude makes a name for himself immediately. People had high hopes and they understood that he has a very high ceiling right off the rip, but just the size, the wingspan that he has, the fact that he's an Olympic caliber Taekwondo artist. But I know we all had, and we still kind of have question marks about him. You have to. If you don't have any question marks in regards to his game, you're an amateur, because here's the thing. The dude has only been in the cage for like a combined, besides one fight, there was one fight where he went to the end of the first round, but every fight has ended in the first round. But you combine all of his other 4 victories, and you're talking about an accumulative of like 30 seconds within 4 victories. What is going to happen if he doesn't find that finish early on? And even that his MMA debut still was a first round finish. How is he going to look in the second round, in the third round? Okay, he doesn't have a grappling base. How is he going to look in fights where they're digging deep and there's a grueling pace and people are shooting singles on him and whatnot? Now Waldo Cortes-Acosta is a boxing-based fighter. I would say his kickboxing and his boxing specifically is his real base. He was a baseball player as well, I believe, or a little bit of a baseball background. So this is a stylistically good matchup for Robelis. They're not throwing him in there with some hard-nosed wrestler, which is smart. You want to kind of try to groom this dude with a couple victories and try to work him up to some more fun fights. But do understand that Waldo Cortes-Acosta is a fighter now that has 12 professional fights in his pocket. He's a fighter that has 5 UFC fights, including Dana White's Contender Series fight. You can pretty much include that. 6 UFC fights. He's been fighting over in LFA, fought over in Bellator. Okay, he's starting to carve out a nice little career as a professional fighter, as a UFC fighter. He gets victories. He just had that one lone loss that we just glossed over, which was against Marcos Rogério de Lima, where his leg got absolutely chewed up. Now, that could be a problem for him here because Robelis obviously has nasty kicks, and if he wants to work the kicking game, if his cardio holds up and the fight lasts longer than a few seconds, maybe we see Robelis chewing those legs up, scoring a lot of points. How about the wingspan there? He's going to have almost a 10-inch reach advantage. It's crazy. An 87-inch reach or an 87-inch wingspan. It's the longest that we've ever seen. He's the most rangiest fighter we've ever seen in the game. And I really hope that he's not a fraud. I hope that as fights progress that he proves to be a hard-nosed fighter and puts on a lot of fun fights for us. But just understand that this is a step up in competition, to say the least. It is. I'm not high in Parisian, and Waldo has shown flashes of potential. And if he gets his mind right and he continues to refine his overall game, he's a formidable fighter in this division. So there are some question marks. That being said, how do I doubt Despaigne after that performance that he just put on? I just almost feel like I just feel like he's going to go out there and he's going to get another early knockout. I do. Now, I don't say it with an overwhelming amount of confidence, but my gut tells me that's how it's going to play out. I think this guy is just wild, and I don't know. I could potentially see that happening. Now, Despaigne opened up as a minus 155. We've seen big action coming in on him. He's now a minus 215 favorite. And I would not be surprised if we continue to see that line getting steamed and he settles in like at a minus 250. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm going to say the value is still on Waldo Cortes-Acosta, even though I said I could see that first round knockout. As this line continues to trend that way, I think the value is on Waldo Cortes-Acosta, which you might be able to get at a plus 200 line. Okay, and if you're getting him at plus 200, see, it just moved as we're speaking. He was just a plus 165, and now he's a plus 175. I mean, this line is moving. Okay, I bet you he touches plus 200, and I'm going to say there's value on that line. I think it's worth taking a little. Potentially, it's worth if you want to taking a little bet out on the 2-1 odds and testing Despaigne once again. How is he going to look when a fight goes to the second round? We've seen Acosta go later in fights, right? I mean, he has a good amount of experience late in fights. Just had a decision victory with the legend Andrei Arlovski. But you do have to note his decision victories that he's been having and whatnot have been against low-level fighters as well. So a lot of moving parts here. Gimme Robelis Despaigne to potentially get that first-round finish once again. But if he doesn't, I'm going to say Waldo Cortes-Acosta may fraud check him and start to have success in the later rounds. We got one of the hometown heroes fighting on the card here, Sean Woodson, representing the STL here. Crowd should be really rooting him on. He's taking on Alex Caceres, a.k.a. Bruce Leroy. Much love to Bruce Leroy. You guys know we did an interview with him back in the day. Really cool dude. gave me the time of day there. We spoke for about an hour or so. So really cool dude. Sean Woodson, like I said, we definitely know he's from St. Louis, hence the nickname, which is a nickname I'm surprised that he's able to get away with. Because you remember they made Calvin Kattar swap his nickname out, and both nicknames kind of have a similar premise, if you know what I'm talking about. Calvin Kattar was the Boston Strangler. They made him change it to the Boston Finisher. Sean Woodson, the STL Sniper. So kind of interesting there. But Sean Woodson is a fighter that I am high on. Okay, we're talking about Despaigne a second ago, talking about the range that he has, the reach advantage that he has. Well, how about the reach that Woodson has for this division? It's crazy, right? For the featherweight division to have a 78-inch wingspan, that's ridiculous. He knows how to use it. He's one of the most fluid boxers in the game. Okay, there's just no question about it. His boxing is beautiful to watch. The way he works the body, the way he moves his head in there. He's a phenomenal fighter. His takedown defense has gotten better and better. The fact that he's so tall, he has these long stilts, and these guys try to dump him, and his legs are just always there. And we heard DC talk about that in regards to like John Jones and whatnot, and how it really makes it hard to take dudes down. And Sean Woodson is really the epitome of that these days. His overall game has came a long way. You take a look at the one loss that he's even taken recently, actually it wasn't even a loss. That just shows you how much work he's been putting in. It was a draw because it was a fight that he was almost finished in, and maybe should have been finished. A lot of other guys probably would have been knocked out. He weathered the storm and he comes back, and then he takes the later rounds, pushes it to a draw. Was submitted by Julian Erosa. That was a mental mistake that he made, going through some growing pains. That was 4 years ago. But besides that, dating back to that flying knee that he hit on Terrance McKinney on Dana White's Contender Series, we talked about that earlier. This dude's been a stud. And he's just getting better and better. Looked phenomenal against Charles Jourdain, against Dennis Bazooka, which that victory even looks better. Dennis looked good in his last fight there. He's 31 years old. It's crazy to think that Bruce Leroy's 35 now, getting up there in age, and he's looked good as of recently. He's looked better as his career's gone on. He's continued to look better and better, even as he's got up there in age. But this is a Woodson pick here. This is a Woodson pick. We'll get over to the betting line here in a second, but I'm high on Sean Woodson. And I think he's going to give a lot of guys problems in this division. I think he's going to stuff takedowns. I think he's going to work his game. He's going to outbox them. His kicking game's getting slightly better as well. He could play the dirty boxing game with you too. You want to sit in the clinch, he'll play that game with you all day. He'll let you push him against the cage and beg for takedowns, but he will not give them. He'll make you pay. He'll score points. The way that the judges are scoring fights too these days, it favors him so much because he's just a fighter that's looking to land damage. And another thing that you got to love about him is that he's a high volume fighter. Okay, so he's a high volume fighter, and at least when I break down tape on him, he's a high volume fighter. Let's check the numbers. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he's a high volume fighter, landing 5.4 strikes per minute, and I'm surprised that number's not even higher. I expect him to have the volume edge here. Bruce Leroy will try to pull out some savvy type attacks, maybe tries to get this fight down to the mat, and he has his own striking game too, but this is a Sean Woodson pick here. So Sean Woodson, he opened up as a minus 185. He's now a minus 195. So some minuscule movement, just was a minus 190. So just dipped. And I would rather be on the Sean Woodson side of things. Anything under minus 200, I have no problem with that. I would even probably edge him up to minus 220. And all you young bucks still coming at me with that. That's one of my terms I like to use. I like to lean, edge. I guess all these new words and these new terms, but if anyone's kind of getting a chuckle, I don't know. I don't really know that term anyway, but I'm leaning Sean Woodson even towards the 2-1 odds that's on him. Now, does he get a finish? Bruce Leroy, let's just take a look at some of his recent losses. Went to a decision against Giga. He was submitted by Pat Sabatini. That was a grappling match there. So, you take a look at all of his recent losses. They have been by decision, besides the Kron Gracie sub loss, which I don't know how he lost that fight as we saw Gracie's career progress, but he ain't getting subbed in this fight. He's been a durable fighter, and Sean Woodson doesn't really have a problem with just beating you up for 15 minutes. He's not really a guy that's looking to start you with that one big shot. Give me Sean Woodson via decision. He's out voluming Caceres here. He has cleaner boxing, works the body. He's more youthful. He's going to have more energy in the cage. He's at a better point in his career right now. And we'll see how much longer Bruce Leroy's hanging around, fighting to go towards the top 15 in this division. Maybe he starts to regress and fall back and eases his way into retirement. In the lightweight division, we have the 39-year-old Diego Ferreira taking on Mateusz Rębecki, a 31-year-old fighter who's cruising into his physical prime. And this is a dude that's really getting his feet under him now in the UFC. He's definitely proved himself to be a very dangerous fighter. Back to Diego, though. Diego, the longtime UFC fighter, a dude that I have a lot of respect for throughout the years, a very game fighter, high caliber grappler. His striking came around throughout the years. But, let's be real about Diego here, man. He's coming off a victory, but it was against Michael Johnson, one of the most flaky fighters that we've ever seen. He knocked him out in the second round. Before that, though, was on a 3-fight losing streak. Lost to Mateusz Gamrot, was finished up in the second round, submitted. Do understand that Mateusz Gamrot is in the camp here for Rębecki, so they know what they're planning for over there at American Top Team. American Top Team over in Coconut Creek, one of the top gyms in the world. And this is going to be a problem for Ferreira, in my opinion. Ferreira, when you take a look at all of his recent victories too, I mean, Johnson, we talked about. Anthony Pettis was losing a lot of fights around then. That was in 2020. Submitted him there. Marbek Taisamov is a fighter that kind of dissipated from the UFC for whatever reasons. He was a dude that I was once high on, but he's gone out there and he's had some big victories, but it was so long ago, man. We're talking about fights that took place 5 years ago. And just the fact that he is now 39 years old, I can't do it. There's no way, first off. But we're going to get to the betting line in a second. But if you want to talk about some of his big victories or big fights, one fight that really stood out to me, I believe he welcomed Dustin Poirier to the lightweight division back in 2015. So if you remember that, Poirier finished him up. And that was Poirier's debut, I believe, coming up from the featherweight division. And but let me just give him some credit for some of these victories, though, over OAM, Jared Gordon, Kyle Nelson, Rustin Khabilov. He's had some impressive victories, but again, 39 years old. These guys are just at different points in their career, and I'm high on Rębecki. I think he's the real deal. He's short for the division. He's a stout dude, but he's very powerful. He's compact, and he's stout. He's strong. And I think he could muscle Ferreira around if they want to play that game. If Ferreira is able to close the distance, I think Rębecki will dominate those type of exchanges. He'll out-muscle him and slam him down. If they fight at range, I like the footwork I've seen from Rębecki. I think he can close the distance and land a nice left or whatnot. He just submitted Roosevelt Roberts, knocked out Loik Rashabov, who proved in his last fight. Once again, Loik is not a joke. Some people were kind of turning their backs on him. Maybe I was one of them, but Loik is a good fighter. Knocked him out there. Decisioned Nick Fiore in his UFC debut. Looked dominant on Dana White's Contender Series over Rodrigo Elidio. And I'm willing to say that Rębecki is the real deal. I think he's the real deal, and I think that he's a fighter that will have a rank next to his name very soon here in the lightweight division. He'll be a great addition towards the top of this division. So give me Mateusz Rębecki to get the job done, and does he find the finish? I think that's one of the real questions, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he could find a finish in this fight. I wouldn't. A 39-year-old Ferreira, he's not the same fighter that he once was, and I think that Rębecki could potentially TKO him. Maybe he finds a sub as well. He's shown to be well-rounded. I'm taking Rębecki via finish here. And right now, he is a minus 400 favorite on BetUS. Opened up as a minus 270. Massive movement dating back to May 4th. Okay, so we have massive movement coming in on Rębecki, and I think it's warranted. Give me Rębecki via finish, and I think that's probably the last time that we see Diego Ferreira inside the octagon or even fighting in the sport of MMA at all. As we reach the top 3 fights of this card, we note they are all fire, and they should all play out very entertainingly. Just letting you guys know we are powered by BetUS. You guys will get matched on your first 3 deposits All right, you'll get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. Check the link in the description. Make an account through that, and I will give you guys a gift as well. Let me know when you do that. All right, guys. So Alonzo Menifield taking on Carlos Ulberg. Menifield, the number 11th ranked light heavyweight fighter. Interestingly enough, Carlos Ulberg, with no rank next to his name, he gets a victory here, and there's no question that he will be in the top 15. Carlos Ulberg, a fighter that has had really, since his Dana White's Contender Series fight, he has had one of the higher ceilings in this division, has the kickboxing pedigree. He's a phenomenal athlete. We just needed to continue to see him refine his overall game, and we all knew he's going to be a major problem in this division. He's now on a 5-fight winning streak over Da Unjong, Ihor Peteria, Nikolai Negamariano, Tafan Nchukwi, and Fabio Charant. And he finished 4 of those 5 victories. And then that was dating back to his UFC debut, where he took that L against Kennedy in Shekawu, which that was a fight where it was definitely a learning experience. There's no question about that. That was a fight where he was having success on the feet early on. He was looking for that finish, and he ended up, I don't want to say he got tired. I mean, he really kind of just got countered, and he did get a little bit winded, and he ended up eating shots. And Kennedy has underrated power, and he broke down in that fight. And it's worth noting that fight because this is a fight here against Menifield where you really hope that Ulberg remembers that loss against Kennedy. If he remembers how it played out, and he remembers the feeling of getting countered or kind of slowing down a bit or getting a little bit too offensive and making some mistakes, because I don't want to just paint a black and white picture here, but if Alonzo Menifield is going to win this fight, I think it's going to be due to him landing a huge strike. And that's been the case with him in a lot of his fights, whether he's knocking you out or even when you take a look at his last victory, which was over Dustin Jacoby, he should have lost every single round of that fight, but then he kept stealing the rounds or taking the rounds by dropping Dustin Jacoby with huge strikes. Okay, so maybe he could do something similarly to that, where even though Ulberg's going to be outpointing him throughout the fight, but if Menifield drops that atomic strike on him, drops him, he's taking that round. And if he does that 2 of the 3 rounds, he takes those two rounds, he wins the fight. All right, so, but besides that, much more realistically, if he lands those big strikes, I can see him getting a knockout on Ulberg. That's the issue there. You don't want Ulberg wobbling around the cage, getting finished up like he did against Nchekwu. Okay, Menifield, a fighter that has some very questionable performances, but he's grown a lot, and he's grown later in his career as well. The decision loss to William Knight, and we also got to note the Jimmy Crute fight the first time around. He kind of gassed out and was grinded out a little bit, and that's how he was hurting Jimmy Crute in that fight too, back to his power. But he was taken down and kind of controlled on the mat a little bit and was winded there. But the William Knight decision loss, the Devin Clark decision loss, those were fights where he was held up against the cage. Now, the game has changed a lot since those losses in 2021. The game has changed a lot. It's very hard to just hold fighters up against the cage and steal rounds. The judges are not scoring these fights the same. That benefits Alonzo Menifield. Menifield's a fighter that's really looking to make a statement with his power. He's a dangerous fighter. All in all, though, I got to go with Carlos Ulberg here. He's the better athlete. He has better footwork. He'll have a 1-inch reach advantage, but he's more rangy. He's a taller fighter. He'll have that leg reach as he wants to work the kicking game from the outside. He just needs to watch out for that big strike, and this will be Carlos Ulberg's fight, in my opinion. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Carlos gets a finish. I mean, he's a fight finisher, so even though Menifield has been durable, Ulberg he's very dangerous, man. So you could easily see Ulberg get a knockout or something like that, a TKO. He's really starting to hit his stride right now, too. This is probably the best version of Ulberg that we're ever going to see. So let's go take a look at the betting line. Carlos Ulberg opened up right around at minus 220 or so, and he's now minus 260. So even though he opened up as a hefty favorite, there's still action coming in on him. And this fight just worries me a little bit, man. Menifield's a dangerous fighter. He's coming in with a lot of confidence. It's kind of hard for me to target a line like this. Even at 220, 230, it's kind of hard for me. These light heavyweight bouts with high caliber fighters and dangerous strikers, man, you see people get clipped all the time. You see people get hurt. And I don't know, man, maybe there's more value on the Menifield line here. I like Ulberg. I'm on Oldberg to get the job done here, whether it's decision or if there's a finish. I would even see it more likely being by him. But there is a very realistic possibility we could also see Menifield land some big strikes in this fight and shake things up. So just be wary with this fight. I like Oldberg though. Hey guys, if you're looking to get my official plays for this fight card, do not hesitate to reach out to me. This is a solid card. I really like the spots that I'm targeting. I'm letting you guys know that right now. If you want to work with me, shoot me an email, shoot me a message on Instagram or Twitter. It's there below. I got my email scrolling, and I will give you guys some further details. But this is a card where I'm going to have some major action out, and it will be another profitable event. So Buckley continued to scream from the rooftops for him to get a big spot on this fight card, and he essentially gets what he asked for. Now, I know he wanted a main event, right? I think he said that, well, why not give him the main event so it could be a 5-round fight? You know, Derrick Lewis didn't want to be fighting in a 5-round fight, but Buckley gets a co-main event slot on the St. Louis fight card, taking on Nursultan Rozaboyev, who's making, at least he's making his welterweight debut in the UFC. His first 2 fights been up in the middleweight division. I'm interested to see how he's going to look on the scales, as he's a pretty big fighter. So I'm kind of interested to see that. And we already saw a little video of him as Buckley bumped into him. And I'll tell you what, man, Rozaboyev didn't look too happy already. And I'm talking about this just happened on Tuesday, and he ain't looking happy. So as that weight cut begins to, increase, he's probably not going to be a happy customer, but we got to keep an eye on him as he looks to step on the scales. Buckley has proven that he can make the weight cut down to the welterweight division, and he looked very good fighting in the welterweight division. As now, he is 3-0, I believe, right? So yeah, the Curtis fight was a middleweight fight. Yeah, he's now 3-0 in the welterweight division. Took out Andre Fiallo, Alex Morono, and Vicente Luque. I'm going to put an asterisk next to Vicente Luque and Andre Fiallo's victories. Vicente Luque, man, sorry, this fight just took place, but I'm not trying to discredit Buckley. Even Buckley joked around about it though on Instagram. That Vicente's head was not on his shoulders for that fight. The dude literally just went to his back. He was looking for a way out of the cage, straight up. Buckley literally joked about the fact that Vicente Luque blew the fight like he did it on purpose, as if he had his boys betting against him or something. I mean, it was weird. But Vicente Luque's had some concussion issues, and Andre Fiallo, speaking of concussion issues, I just don't put too much stock in either of those victories. Alex Morono, he's always a game fighter, but take that one for what you will. He's a game dude, and that was a decision victory for Buckley. Rozaboyev needs to show us a lot more, but he's a fighter that has a very high ceiling. Something that I would be cautious about as far as being on the Rozaboyev side is that he has a lot of quick victories. Okay, this guy, he doesn't spend a lot of time in the cage, and you got to kind of wonder what he's going to look like late in this fight, where you got Buckley who pushes the pace late in fights, and maybe the weight cut's killing Rozaboyev and he slows down during this fight. That could be an issue. You look at all of his recent fights, the 2 fights in the UFC so far, both finishes in the first round, even over to his fights that took place beforehand, first round finishes, left and right here. So he has gone to a decision, but it was a while ago. He's a dangerous fighter, is Rozaboyev. He's shown that he's an absolute dangerous striker. But he also has 16 submission victories. So if this fight does go down to the mat, trust me when I say that Rozaboyev is crafty down the mat. He has some nasty sub skills. I don't know if we necessarily see him grinding Buckley out with his wrestling. Buckley has shown to have good takedown defense, and but maybe Rozaboyev can snatch something up in that type of situation. So I am on Rozaboyev here. Okay, I'm buying in to what I've seen from him. I'm going to say that as his fights start to go to the later rounds, that he actually proves to be game. And I'm going to say that he's a fighter that doesn't just gas out. I have a feeling that this is a dude that's very professional. I think that he's a well-rounded fighter, and I think that he'll be a lot more game than people think. He does need to watch out throwing his kicks in this matchup here. I've seen him kind of throw some naked kicks at times, and I worry a little bit about that because Buckley has really been looking to counter the kicking game. We saw that in the Vicente Luque fight. If he throws some naked kicks, I could see Buckley looking to crack him with the heavy hook. Also have to note, fight taking place in St. Louis. Even if Rozaboyev is maybe slightly beating him in these rounds, maybe the crowd's going crazy for Buckley. And you guys know the judges can never be trusted. All right. So I'm more skeptical on my pick for this fight than I was initially when this fight was announced. Well, when this fight was first announced, I was feeling pretty good about the Rosaboyev pick. But I'll tell you what, I do see a very realistic possibility where we can see Numanza Buckley take the W here. I think there's a realistic possibility. And this the other thing I want to note is Rosaboyev has looked very sharp defensively, but it's been for such a small amount of time in the cage. I think it's like a combined 4 minutes that he spent in the octagon within those two fights. But this dude looks sharp defensively. He doesn't get touched up at all. And I want to see how he looks in the later rounds, if he can continue to look sharp defensively. And I'm on Rosaboyev here. Let's take a look at the money line here, where Rosaboyev opened up on BetUS as plus 120. He was a plus 115. We saw a little action coming in on him. And now we see the action coming in on Buckley, which we see Rosaboyev at plus 140 there. He's now right around a plus 130. So if you like Rosaboyev, you're getting that dog value there. This is a tough one. And either way, it should be a fun fight. I'm going to say that Rosaboyev can actually land his own knockout in this fight. Okay, he's a knockout artist. He's a fight finisher. He might even get a sub, but I think there's a very realistic possibility we see Numanza get finished like we've seen in the past. Don't forget when he got slept by Holland. I know he's looked better recently, but we may see him get finished here. Again, Rosaboyev is a finisher, but then there's also a realistic possibility that Numanza takes this fight over late. These are some moving parts that we got to monitor. There's a likelihood that the fight could play out like one of those ways, but there's a lot of moving parts. We don't know. There's a lot of questions that haven't been answered, and maybe these fighters do answer it. Maybe Rosaboyev looks sharp late in this fight. Give me Rosaboyev via first round knockout. Here we go. We got the main event. Derrick Lewis, the Black Beast, the king of the knockout, taking on Rodrigo Nascimento, a fighter that came into MMA, came into the UFC with a more of a BJJ base, but has really showcased that he's a well-rounded fighter. His striking has come around. Derrick Lewis, man, you kind of know what you're getting with him. It's either a phenomenal knockout or he's kind of rolling on his back like a turtle, like we saw in his last fight against Jailton Almeida. You could say cardio has been an issue for him at times, but realistically, he's had that dog in him even late in fights, even though things haven't always panned out good for him later in fights. This is a fight, man, that it can go one of two ways. It's like Derrick Lewis is either going to run out here and starch Rodrigo Nascimento similarly to what he did to Marcos Rogerio de Lima. We could see a very realistic possibility that happens, or like he did to Chris Daukaus, or like Curtis Blades, or Alexei Oleinik. I mean, we could see an earlier devastating knockout, or we could see the grappling of Derrick Lewis kind of be his weakness, and maybe Rodrigo Nascimento goes out here, fights an intelligent fight, and just continues to try to get this fight down to the mat and tries to lean on the BJJ skills that he possesses. Like I said, that's his original base, and he does have some solid jiu-jitsu, even though he looks to duke it out on the feet when he's in the octagon. Coming off 3 decision victories in a row over Dontel Mays, Alir Latifi, and Tanner Bozier. Knocked out Alan Budat, but that fight was overturned. But that was a knockout victory. That was probably the best performance we've seen from him in the cage. And then don't forget when he was knocked out by Chris Daukaus, which Chris Daukaus was a huge underdog in that fight. If you guys remember, I cashed in on that. That was one of the biggest underdog plays I've hit. I think I got Daukaus at like plus 340 or something. It was crazy. And back to those submission skills, had the submission victory on Dana White's Contender Series over Michal Martinek, and submitted Dontel Mays in his UFC debut. So those submission skills are there. Now, Derrick Lewis is not easy to submit. He's only been subbed 2 times out of his 12 losses. So he's really, when he's lacking in the grappling aspect, it's more he just gets taken down continuously and he has a tough time getting up, and he'll eventually use a lot of energy to burst back up to his feet, and he'll have a little moment where he'll search for that knockout, but then he's vulnerable to being taken back down and controlled. And I think that if Rodrigo Nascimento fights an intelligent fight, I think that he can control Derrick Lewis here. It's so hard to say because you just never know what you're getting with Derrick Lewis. You don't know what form of Derrick Lewis you're going to get. And again, I mean, the victory that he just had, that we just mentioned before, that victory that he just had over Marcos Rogerio de Lima. I mean, if that's the version of Derrick Lewis that comes out and he's trim and he's really, really looking to get a W here, I could easily see him coming out here starching Rodrigo Nascimento. In fact, he could still knock out Rodrigo Nascimento even if he's not fully devoted to this fight and he just lands the mark. The power is ridiculous. One of the best fight finishers we've ever seen. In fact, he may be the best finisher that we've ever seen. I mean, we're talking about maybe a guy that has more power than anybody we've ever seen. I know there's different tests that they do with these fighters, and some guys have scored higher or whatever. I think, if you ask me, I think that Derrick Lewis, one of his overhand rights, or really any of his power strikes, I think they're more dangerous and they scare me more than any other attack in the sport. I think I'd be more fearful of taking a strike from Derrick Lewis than anybody in the game. If he lands, he will knock out Rodrigo Nascimento. Circle back to that Dawkins fight real quick. I mean, if Dawkins can knock out Nascimento, obviously the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, can. With that all being said, I just didn't like the way Derrick Lewis looked in that last fight against Shelton Almeida. And Almeida may be a little bit more proven with his grappling and his offensive wrestling than a Nascimento, and I do worry that Nascimento may engage in the striking a little bit too much. But when I settle in on my pick here, I will be picking Rodrigo Nascimento, the underdog. I will be picking him in the main event here. Opened up as a plus 140. Action's been coming in on him. He was a plus 110. Now he's a plus 125. I just, if he could avoid that knockout, I think that he'll be in better shape. And just also don't sleep on his striking too. If Derrick Lewis gets reckless and they're looking for his own knockout, we've seen Derrick Lewis get knocked out before. Nascimento has striking skills. He has power. He has boxing skills. But it's the grappling that I think Nascimento can use to kind of grind Lewis out, have him breathing heavily, just get this fight down to the mat, drag him down to the deep waters and try to take control of this fight. I like the dog value on Rodrigo Nascimento in the main event there. And wouldn't be surprised though if Derrick Lewis goes out there and gets a big knockout early in this fight. But it's hard for me to bank on him right now with that performance. And he's 39 years old, Nascimento 31. Derrick Lewis is getting up there in age, and let's see how he looks on the scales, okay? Maybe I'll do a follow-up video. I know some of you guys have been talking about me doing a video after the weigh-ins. Sometimes it's hard for me though, because by the time that happens, the teller is getting ready for my Friday festivities. I know I need to put more time into what I'm doing here. I need to take, I need to deliver more for you guys, but sometimes it's tough on Friday evening to be behind the computer when, the drinks are calling and whatnot, and life's calling, and the sun's out later than ever right now this time of year, and I like to get out. But maybe I'll do that. I'll start trying to get that done for you guys. We'll see how Lewis looks on the scales. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC St. Louis. Got to leave you guys with some parting words, as you know. Got some good ones for you here. I was listening to an interview with Dustin Poirier. In fact, it was Theo Von that was giving him the interview there on his podcast. Theo Von, always a funny listen there. And, Dustin Poirier mentioned in this interview how he was coming off that KO loss to Justin Gaethje and how he was really going through it mentally. He was really down and out, man. He was depressed and all that. And how it really fueled him to train hard and prepare for that next fight against PSD. And he kind of slipped up and said, I would say he slipped by saying the joke was on them though, because he felt like everybody was turning his back on him. But he said they kind of slipped up by doing that. And they made that mistake because, he went out there and he did what he did, right? But I would just say this much, and no disrespect, because I'm a huge Dustin Poirier fan. But if he thinks like that, I think that the joke it would be on him, because even though he pushed Father Time back there for a second, I hate to say it, eventually Poirier is going to take some losses. And he's probably going to take some brutal losses towards the tail end of his career. And everyone's going to turn their back on him once again. Okay, so I just say that to just kind of say that you have to prepare and be willing to take those harsh times that are going to come. You need to just embrace them. Don't care about what anybody thinks. Don't care about what the fans, if they turn their back on you. All that should matter to you. What I would say to DP is the only thing that matters is really what your family thinks of you. Those are the ones that are really going to be there to the end. They are the ones that are going to be there to the end. Your very close friends. what they think of you is all that matters. So DP needs to start embracing the fact that all the fan base is going to turn their back on him, and he will be washed one day, and people will completely overlook him at the tail end of his career, and it is what it is. He needs to embrace that. He doesn't need to live the rest of his life being a top 10 fighter, a top 5 fighter. It's unrealistic, and you could spin that for anything that you got going on in your life, right? So you're not always going to be the best looking person. If you get through life a lot on your looks, if you're a girl that's really pretty, or you're a guy that's a good looking dude, you're eventually going to age. Don't rely on that. Don't rely on what people, these simple people to you, what they think of you. Focus on being a good person, and the people that you really care about, make sure what they think of you is good. I think that's a good way to look at that. I'll leave you guys with that. All right, guys. And I hope you guys all have a profitable event for this card. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. And make sure you're following me on my social media on Instagram and Twitter. It's there below, and that's the best way to keep up with me throughout the week as we lead up to these fights. And I'll be live and putting stories out Saturday night. All right, guys. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.